Welcome, Retro Yackers, to the first edition of Yackchat, a series that explores the past through the medium of conversation. In other words, it's an audio podcast about old stuff. This inaugural edition features a man whose words you are likely to have read on your television set at some point in the 1990s. That's right, the written word on television, namely Teletext, that odd piece of technology that passed for the internet in the 70s and 80s. Paul Rose, aka Mr. Biffo, is the writer of the daily Teletext video games magazine, Digitiser, which recently made a comeback in the form of Digitiser2000.com. Through the years, his ditties and vignettes have been read by millions of impressionable kids wondering exactly who this Mr. T chap was, and why he so hated people messing around with his bins. As we shall soon find out, however, there is so much more to the man than off-the-wall gaming reviews. Wait a minute, why am I referring to this guy as though he isn't listening to me right now? Because he's right here. Paul, welcome to Yackchat.
Hello. It's very good to be here.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to have you here on this first ever edition of Yackchat. I'm very honoured that you would decide to come on this show.
It's an honour to be here. It's always lovely to be asked.
Will you cup my tea then, please?
Well, not literally asked to do anything. So, no. But yes, no, it's very nice to be here. Not sure about the being referred to as old things, but I'm happy to be celebrated.
Okay. Well, is there any part of the intro that you take issue with? Any factual inaccuracies you'd like to point out?
No, you were bang on. That all sounded about right. And the old bit as well, let's face it.
Thank you. I stole it all from Wikipedia. Next, you'll be telling me that you wrote your own Wikipedia article.
I'm pretty sure I, back in the day, tinkered with it at points. I'm sure I did. Which I'm... yeah, I know, but whatever, deal with it. It's, but we're talking probably 10 years ago. I barely remember, but yeah, I'm sure everyone does it. Come on.
Yes. All those people who do have Wikipedia pages, they probably do it. Those notable swines.
Yes. Mind you, I haven't even looked at mine for years. It's probably been vandalised to hell. I probably did that too.
Paul, it is fantastic to speak to you again. You were so kind as to appear on an episode of Retro and Them Live a couple of months ago. And indeed, I am honoured and yet simultaneously surprised that you decided to come back for more.
Well, you've been a real supporter of Digitiser 2000, which I am hugely grateful for. You know, you are sort of always among the first to kind of retweet and plug it, and it sort of means a lot, really, that you would do that. Plus, as well, you know, you've got a bit of an affinity with Teletext yourself, shall we say? So I guess there's a bit of kindred spirits going on.
Yes, indeed. I should say we're two of a dying breed here in the UK, teletext artists.
Yeah, well, yes, if not a dead breed.
Well, it's not completely dead, actually. Paul, I'm sure that you've noticed there is a bit of a teletext art subculture that's gathering some momentum at the moment. Does that rekindle a flame of nostalgia?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It was, people probably don't know this, and I'm quite happy to tell them how you and I first contacted or got in contact with one another. In that I was last year, before Digitiser 2000 launched, I was looking into the possibility of doing some sort of crowd-funded book about Digitiser. And I was looking for a way to do teletext graphics, which is how I stumbled across yourself, so to speak. And I think it's really cool. I didn't even know until I found your work that community was out there. I think it's awesome, and some of the stuff that people are putting together is so much better than I used to do back in my day of doing teletext graphics. It's really, really cool. I love it.
I think you are Mr. Teletext Art here in the UK. You are the pioneer of it because, well, maybe throughout the 70s and 80s people experimented with it, but that sort of ornate teletext page died out in the 90s when CFAX and to a lesser extent Channel 4 became a little bit stale, a little bit, oh, teletext is for text and information. Is this something that you actually felt when you were working for Teletext?
I don't know if there was any kind of sense of, oh, we need to make this more visual. From my point of view, that's what I was hired to do. I was originally hired to be the graphic designer for Teletext, and I prior to that I'd been working in Teletext graphics for Ladbroke Racing. That's what I did. I did their kind of Teletext visuals for their in-store betting service and their Oracle pages, as it was before Teletext existed. Teletext Limited existed, I should say. And then I got a job for Teletext, which was taken over from Oracle. It was a job as a graphic designer. So I had to justify my existence, really. So, kind of, doing the graphics, that's what I was there for. And there were things, the Turn of the Worm cartoon, which were my idea, because there were actually so few graphics that needed doing on a daily basis, tiny little icons that would go in the corner of a screen. My work was more or less done every day by kind of 9:30, 10 o'clock. So I had to find things to do, which, kind of doing a kid's cartoon, that was one thing. Writing the video games pages, that was another. I was just trying to fill my day. So, there was no concerted kind of campaign to kind of, we need to make Teletext more visual. It was my job. So, I had to justify my wages at the end of the month.
Well, you mentioned the Teletext graphics there. I think the most famous one of all, apart from maybe Bamba Boozler, is the real Turn of the Worm being sick graphic. Now,
yes.
Was this something that you had planned for a long time, or a spur-of-the-moment thing, if you'll excuse the innuendo there? And also, do you know if Channel 4 ever received any complaints about it?
God, I mean, all I know is that in my last kind of couple of weeks writing Digitiser, I went all out to be a bit risque, because the way it worked with Digi, the sub-editors were certain that we were sneaking kind of dodgy stuff into the pages, when often we weren't. 90% of the time, things that they picked up on or censored weren't actually meant to be rude. They were just so hugely oversensitive about it. But in the last couple of weeks, I just went, sod it. I'm going to go all out, and I'm going to sneak kind of iffy stuff in there. And I don't know if the real Turn of the Worm being sick was actually kind of planned much in advance. I probably did, like I did with most Digitiser things. I got to that page, I'd written a kind of goodbye statement to the audience, and I probably had a bit of space at the bottom of the page. It was probably completely spur of the moment, off the cuff. What can I do that sums up my time at Teletext? Well, I used to do Turn of the Worm as a cartoon strip for the kids pages. Digitiser is known for being a bit risque. Let's combine them. What's the worst they can do? Fire me? It was my last day. I still don't know how I got away with it. I still don't know how it went out on air and got past the sub-editors. And I don't know if we got any complaints. I didn't, certainly it didn't get taken off air, so there weren't any complaints that day. I honestly don't know. It was the real Turn of the Worm being sick. it's people choose to read into it something else. Well, that's up to them.
Yeah, exactly. It is, ladies and gentlemen, kids under 18. It is just a worm being sick. That's all it is.
Yeah, vomiting milk.
Vomiting milk, of course. So, sadly, the original Digitiser did have to come to an end. I have an extract here from Digitiser's goodbye message, which summarises the whole thing beautifully. As George Harrison discovered not so long ago, all things must pass. Flowers bloom and wilt. Puerile imagery gets scrubbed off school lockers. Digi's time has finally come. It's time to move on. Grow up. Stand alone and proud. So, Paul, what did you do immediately after Digitiser ended? Were the gaming mags banging down your door to draft you in, or did you end up applying for a job at the Beano?
At the time that Digi ended, I was already working as a TV writer. So, I was writing stuff like My Parents Are Aliens for CITV. I was writing, I think, crossroads of all things at the time, and so that just carried on. There didn't need to be something else to fill the void. That said, I did contact Edge and said to them, "How about a column?" And they said, "Yeah, absolutely." So that was about the only kind of job application, if you like, that I did, which was just purely email them and sort of say, do you fancy me popping up in your pages? Yeah, I already had, Digitiser really towards the end, even though it was daily and, lots of people read it. It was basically a part-time job. And I had another job alongside that, much like I do now, really, with Digitiser 2000.
Well, I have to ask this. Do you think that working for Teletext and writing Teletext pages improved your writing in any way? I mean, fitting reports and reviews down to a limited series of 80-word pages. How did that affect the development of your writing, do you think?
It did. It made a big difference. It certainly helped me to be more concise, which ironically, actually, I got an email from a Digitiser 2000 reader yesterday complaining that, well, no, he wasn't complaining, no, he was making a suggestion, and it was a good suggestion, that some of our blog posts are a bit long, and maybe we could consider bringing them back down to kind of Digitiser teletext size, which is valid because, having that, I guess those boundaries of those pages meant I had to be concise and get the information across and make it funny. So, yeah, I think it helped. It always helps, I think, to have some sort of structure in place. Of course, that has all gone out the window now that I'm doing this new website, and I've just kind of gone splurge. I'm just going to keep writing until I stop writing. But I may start getting old, and I may have to start kind of being a bit more disciplined with myself. Otherwise, we'll just lose all our readers. People go, "There's just too many words on this page. I don't have time for this." So yeah.
I was going to ask, do you have a self-imposed word limit, or are you enjoying the freedom that the web gives you as compared to teletext?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much the freedom that it gives me compared to teletext. It's more the freedom it gives me compared to what my day job has been for the last, I don't know, 10, 12, 13, 14 years, which is writing TV scripts. How in some respects every bit as, disciplined as the teletext pages were, if not more so. That has to be kind of, very concise and structured. So if anything, the way I'm writing at the moment is more a reaction to that than the way I wrote Digitiser, which was, kind of 12 years ago, something like that I stopped doing it. It's kind of ancient history really to me. So yeah, it's more me kind of going, God, I sort of, had enough of people telling me to kind of cut 10 pages out of this script. That scene needs to be 2 pages shorter, and it's just me kind of going, I'm just going to write what I want. To hell with the you. But yeah, it might not always be what people want to read.
Oh, I find it interesting, but then I would, because I like video games.
Good.
But on that subject, did your employers at Teletext ever really get annoyed with you at anything you wrote? Did it turn into a game to see what strange stuff you could get away with?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, I'd love to be able to deny that, but yeah, they did get annoyed. And then, partly we were stupid. We were young men, but both myself and Tim, Mr. Hares, who in the early days I used to write Digi with, we had family. We risked our jobs just to kind of get innuendo on the teletext pages. It was really stupid with hindsight, but it was never as bad as teletext feared. And it was only when they started kind of getting a bit kind of oversensitive and a bit jumpy when it came to Digi that we actually went, you know what, we are going to sneak stuff in. We are going to be, you think we're doing it, all right, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it in a really sneaky, esoteric way, and you're never going to know what the innuendo is. But it was like they kind of had this subconscious sense that we were doing it, and so they'd then become even more jumpy and start picking up on things that weren't meant to be rude. I think I mentioned this in the last podcast that you and I did together, where we had a guy, I had one of the sub-editors ring me up one day, and he'd just deleted half a page, a whole half a page, just hadn't bothered replacing it with anything. He'd misread something in there as an innuendo, and just rather than kind of give me a chance to either take out that line, he just deleted the whole page. And it turned out it was something on it which was a link to the index page, the teletext index page, and it had said finger the index, page 101 or something like that. And it honestly wasn't meant to be an innuendo. It was, you press the index finger, you've got an index finger, and you kind of use that to kind of, press buttons on your remote control to go to the index page. Anyway, and I had to say to him, I said, I'm really sorry, I don't quite understand what was rude about that. And then he started mumbling and stumbling over his words and getting very nervous and hot under the collar, and mumbled stuff about fingering and things that you do with fingers. And I said to him, that probably means more about you than it does about me, I'm afraid. And then about 6 months later, he became the editor of Teletext.
Oh dear!
And at that point, we were probably doomed. Anyway, we were naughty. We brought a lot of it upon ourselves, without a doubt.
So, are there any pieces of innuendo, Digitiser innuendo, that you snuck past the censors that you're really proud of?
Yeah, there's one in particular. God, this is really obscure. There was an EastEnders character. God, what was his name? It was a really... Danny Taurus. For a while, there was a character in EastEnders who was like a pub singer called Danny Taurus, who was romantically linked with Pauline Fowler for a while. And he wore a wig or toupee in EastEnders, and it was like this ridiculous toupee. They made a joke out of it in the show, but we featured him on our pages as a character, and we had the wig, except our version of his wig was basically shaped like a cock and balls, quite blatantly. We didn't even disguise it. It was like a kind of erect penis on this man's head, and it was up there for a week. It was on our pages for a week, and then we got a letter from a viewer who had drawn a picture of it. Back in the days before smartphones, and you could just take pictures and print them out. He'd drawn a picture of the Danny Taurus character on Digitiser with his wig and penis hair, and it kind of asking us to explain it with a kind of arrow pointing to the toupee, saying possible cock and balls ? At which point we changed the graphic and quietly retired the character.
Oh, there must be some pictures somewhere online of this character. If not, we need to start a campaign to find these pictures.
Yeah, someone needs to find it. Yeah. Find Danny Taurus.
Hashtag find Danny Taurus. Let's start it. So actually, speaking of cartoons, where does the name Mr. Biffo come from? It sounds a bit like a character from a British comic strip.
That's exactly where it came from. Yeah, slightly ironically, now that everyone knows my real name, not everyone, but everyone who kind of knows who Mr. Biffo is sort of knows my real name.
Everybody who's listening to this podcast, because I introduced you as your full name, but I can cut that out if you wish.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm happy to be semi... what's the opposite of anonymous? Anonymous. Yeah, in the early days of Digi, it used to wind us up the way that games magazines would try to make kind of semi-celebrities out of their journalists, caricatures of them and kind of photographs and the stuff. I mean, it wouldn't annoy me now, but, I was 21, 22, something like that back in those days, and it used to wind us up. And so, but people wanted to know who wrote Digitiser, and they would write in asking. And we didn't want to kind of give out our real names. We wanted to kind of not be like the writers of CMVG and try to be famous. We wanted to stay anonymous. So we made up some names, and Biffo came from, at the time, we were kind of doing this sort of fake puffy jacket speak, as we used to say back in the day, sort of pre-Ali G, where for some reason we'd taken to calling things kind of saying that is well Biffo man, or that is Corky the cat. I don't know why I've sort of taken kind of Beano and Dandy characters, but we had. So
that's very, very British in a way, isn't it? I like that.
Yeah, kind of yeah, using the Beano and the Dandy for street slang.
You got half an ounce of Beano?
Yeah.
Here, come round here for a whizzer and chips.
Isn't is it anyway? No, I was going to start talking about drugs then.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I should quantify that. I'm not that I've got any kind of knowledge of drugs in any shape or form. Uh, I'm digging myself into a hole here.
Just say no.
Yes, just say no, kids. Yes, heroin, it'll mess you up. Not that I've got any experience of that either. God, what am I talking about? I was talking about where Mr. Biffo. Yeah, so we just plucked the name out of the air, really. You know, we kind of had to come up with three names. One of them was Mr. Biffo. Mr. Hairs, we plucked out of the air because Hairs is funny because it sounds a bit like pubic hairs. Not that I really have to spell that out. And the third person who was part of our team back then was a guy called Adam Keeble, who he had chosen the name Mr. Cheese because he came to work with us because he'd entered a competition as which he ended up winning, and he'd entered it under the name Cheese. The reason he'd entered it under the name Mr. Cheese because actually he was a friend of mine, and he didn't want to look like he'd sort of won under false pretenses. But he did it one fair and square, and then I found out who it was. So anyway, yeah, Biffo, Hairs and Cheese. We were the original Digi people in an attempt to become anonymous, and then that all backfired massively, and now I have no anonymity.
The Three Musketeers, eh? I was just going to say, Mr. Cheese, yes. That was in the days before the Anton Deck debacle and the phone-in nonsense.
What was that? What? Oh, what?
There was a whole thing with Anton Deck, wasn't there? They made a big thing about this with ITV in the 2000s about relations of the presenters phoning in or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because somebody who works there won.
Yeah. Well, it was a mate of mine won this competition. I mean, the prize wasn't very big. It was probably some crappy Amiga game because he had an Amiga. So yes, it probably was some crappy Amiga game that he won. But he entered anonymously and he won because his entry was the funniest. And then I think I saw him the following week and he went, "Oh, that was me, by the way." So, fair play to him. And then we needed someone to do the teats and chips and kind of sort out the letters and stuff for us. And then we ended up inviting him to come and work for us. And yeah, he stayed at Teletext for years.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to work somewhere, enter a competition.
Yes. Enter a competition under a false name.
Under a false name, that's important. Did you know that John Cleese's real name, is actually John Cheese?
I did know that, actually. Yes, I did. I read that in his book. I think his dad changed his name so that he didn't get the mickey taken out of him in the army, I believe.
Cheese? Drop and give me 50.
Yes, he didn't want people calling him Cheesy.
Cheesy. So, I wish to change the subject just ever so slightly here, move off on a slight tangent. But did you watch the video game TV shows in the 90s?
Yes.
Yeah, I note that in a 2009 tribute to Teletext, when it ended, you mentioned Games Master and Games World, so please tell me that Games World was your favourite of the two.
Well, it kind of was in some respects, but I didn't like... I know you're a fan. I didn't like all of it. I probably liked the bits that you didn't like. I don't know why I'm making that assumption about you. That's terrible. I really liked, God, what was it called? Barry's Joypad with the young David Williams, who played a character called Leslie, which I really liked his character Leslie, and I watched it for that. Which I know that's probably a controversial thing to say because I know perhaps Big Boy Barry perhaps isn't the most popular of Games World characters, but David Williams back in those days when he was a complete unknown, I just thought he was really funny.
Yes.
So I liked it for that.
Yeah, I never actually used to like Barry TV and Barry's Joypad, but watching back, they've got some really good writing on there. I believe David Williams did most, if not all, of the writing on there.
Yeah. Do you know who else used to write for Games World? Matt Berry. Did you know that? The comedian Matt Berry, who does Toast of London and is in Vic and Bob's House of Fools. He was in a pilot that I did once, and I don't know how I found out that he'd written for Games World, but I did. But yeah, he was a bit embarrassed when I brought it up, and he said, "How did you find that out?" And I just went, I just did. Anyway, there you go. There's a bit of trivia for your readers.
How'd you find that out? Internet.
Probably was.
But yes, Larry Bundy told me about Matt Berry.
Ah, okay. You knew that already.
Well, kind of. I'd forgotten it, because I can't remember what I said 10 minutes ago. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Paul Rose. Did I say that? No, I can't remember. Sorry. Well, you mentioned that you quite like Leslie Lunch and Meat there, but who were your main influences for Digitiser? What sorts of things were you reading and watching at the time, and did they rub off on your writing, would you say?
There's a rude joke in there about rubbing off on my writing, isn't there?
Maybe.
Sorry, I'm bringing the toner down again.
That's quite all right. No, you're
usually-
raising it, if anything.
It was first show. It's kind of, one would hope that it's all uphill from here. Right, where was I? Yes. So, well, the games mag that I really used to love growing up was Your Sinclair, which had a kind of an anarchic feel to it. You know, I mean, I think Amiga Power, is it Amiga Power? Had which was the one that Stuart Campbell and Jonathan Nash and people wrote for, I believe. I mean, I think that had a similar sort of sensibility to Digi, but I wasn't an Amiga owner, so I never read it. But Your Sinclair was one that really did influence me. You know, I can't remember specifics now, but I do remember kind of loving it at the time. You know, I used to have, my mother bought me, bizarrely, this is going to make me sound like some horrible spoiled child, but she bought me a caravan. She used to live in the garden of my parents' house. Yeah, no, it was like, it wasn't a new caravan. She got it off like a friend for like about 50 quid or something like that. This horrible tatty rundown old caravan. But she bought it as a place for me and my mates to hang out in. It was basically a kind of slightly more exotic garden shed. That's all it was, really. And yeah, it just sort of dominated my parents' tiny back garden. But yeah, I remember I had all my copies of Your Sinclair in this caravan. Kind of, you know, I'd saved them all for years. So Your Sinclair was a big influence. Beyond that, I mean, it was stuff like the kind of, I don't know if you ever read them, but the sort of Monty Python spin-off books, like the brand new Paperbock and the Monty Python's Big Red Book, stuff like you know, the Young Ones book. I don't know if you ever read that. I can't remember what the actual book was called, but the book version of the Young Ones TV series. I love all those. You know, the way that it sort of would take the spirit of those TV shows and put them in a kind of word form. And I think all those sort of things all helped to influence the way Digi was written. Sorry, I was trying not to burp at the end of that sentence. It kind of tailed off a bit. I've just taken a drink before I started speaking, and I was desperately holding in a belch.
Well, that's quite all right. This is edited.
No, you can leave that in. I'm quite happy for my near belch to stay in the podcast.
So did you have a sort of love-hate relationship with the gaming mags then? Because I read that you were sort of bickering between each other, taking jabs at each other. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it was stupid, really. I mean, it was, we intended it as good-natured. I mean, I don't think we started it. I think Mean Machines possibly started it. Whichever magazine a guy called Steve Merritt edited, he started making a few kind of digs about Digi, so we would make a few digs back. And ours were always kind of a bit surreal and weird. And then we'd kind of get the next issue's magazine and go through it, and the sort of jibes in there always had like an edge of sort of annoyance and kind of aggressiveness to them that we'd obviously kind of got under their skin. But we never really took it seriously, but I think other people were genuinely annoyed by us. But you know, that was Digi. We always just seemed to annoy people. In fact, on the Digitiser 1000 blog today, I managed to annoy a load of people because I put up a video of some cats having fights with some babies. A number of people complained. So I'm like still doing it. I did take it down because I just thought, I can't be arsed with these oversensitive cat lovers. Can't mess with the cat lovers, can you?
No.
Anyway, there you go. I'll probably upset the cat lovers on your show.
Oh, it's okay. They're all dog lovers on this show. They're all yak lovers.
Well, yeah. You wish.
Oh, yes.
I have 2 cats, by the way. I'm going off at a tangent about my cats now.
Oh, go on. Tell us about your cats.
Are your listeners really tuning in to hear me talking about my cats?
I don't know, maybe. They're more likely to tune in about your cats than my video gaming prowess.
Well, I have 2 cats who hate me. No, that's not true. One of them is completely disinterested in me, and the other one barely tolerates me, and he becomes interested when he wants food. But they have good names. There's one is called the Ultimate Legend, and the other is called the Penultimate Legend. But we call them Tully and Penny for short. They got the best names.
That is brilliant. See, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Biffo is a cat lover, so even though he's posting these nasty videos about cats, he's doing it ironically, in much the same way that he posted pictures of worms being sick ironically.
Exactly. Yes. Drawing attention to the inadvertent hilarity of animal abuse.
Yes. We don't condone that, ladies and gentlemen.
No, it's not funny. Of course we don't condone it. It wasn't animal abuse on that video, for heaven's sake. Edit that bit out.
Okay, sure, absolutely.
It's
There was a funny cat video you did post, either today or yesterday, of the Grand Theft Auto 5 cat being scared.
Yes, but that's not a real cat. They didn't object to that, but I did wonder whether that had kind of primed them that when I did put up a video of some real cats having fights with babies, whether that was it, that tipped them over the edge. Quite possibly. Who knows?
Maybe they wanted literal cat fights with slappers outside of clubs smacking each other over the head with handbags.
With cats in them.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Anyway.
Well, speaking of slap fights, here's a question that was submitted. Did you ever review Shaq Fu, and what were your thoughts?
Yeah, that's weird that should be asked, because I've just started watching. There's an new American sitcom called Fresh Off the Boat, and they just did it's set in 1995, and they just did a whole episode about Shaq Fu, believe it or not. So it's really weird that someone should ask that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did review Shaq Fu, and I remember barely anything about it. Most of what I know about Shaq Fu now I know from the episode of Fresh Off the Boat that I watched last week, which is that it's not very good, I believe. So, yes, why would your listener want to know that?
I have no idea. It might be something to do with the fact that one of our listeners, one of our members, is called Shaq Stew. That might give you a bit of a clue as to why somebody has asked that.
Could be, yes. I thought you were going to say one of your listeners is Shaquille O'Neal.
Yes.
That would have been...
He is secretly Shaquille O'Neal.
Wanting to know if people played and reviewed his game back in the day.
It's market research.
He's become a bit sad and desperate, living off past glories of the things that he licensed back in the 90s. Oh, Shaquille.
I'm expunging that question from the record now, Shaq. You can't use that as market research.
No, it's done.
So we were speaking a little bit earlier about your writing influences for Digitiser, but did you have any artistic influences?
Yeah, probably. I'm going back to Monty Python. It was probably kind of Terry Gilliam and his stuff. You know, I loved that. I don't know. It was just that otherworldliness. It felt sort of consistent, even though you kind of would have a sort of cutout of, oh God, what's the picture with the Venus standing in the clamshell with the, he would cut out kind of pictures from kind of classical paintings and then put them beside those kind of weird Gumbies that he used to do, and it always felt consistent, and that sort of strange airbrushed style that he had. So Terry Gilliam, without a doubt, was an influence. God, I mean, I was really into back in those days. I had this thing for an artist called Brendan McCarthy, who was a comics artist. He did some Judge Dredd stuff, but he did a whole bunch of much kind of weirder and more surreal independent comics. He's recently, the new Mad Max film that's coming out, he co-wrote the script for that with George Miller. because he was a massive Mad Max fan, and then he became a concept artist and storyboard artist for films. Managed to get this idea to George Miller, and so now he's kind of moved into that. But his stuff is fantastic. Brendan McCarthy is probably my favourite comics artist of all time. And then in terms of proper artists, and I think you can see the influence in a lot of Digi stuff. Some of the sort of weirder, kind of creepier graphics that we used to do with the sort of weird. I don't know if you've ever noticed them. I have this tendency to kind of put these strange these rings around people's mouths, and these sort of straps that make it look like the mouths are kind of strapped to their faces. And that probably comes from, this is going to make you sound really pretentious, but that probably comes from sort of liking Francis Bacon, who there's a series of paintings that he did that, God, I think it's a triptych, something like a study of three figures at the base of a crucifixion or something like that. And they're just really these weird, creepy, kind of, I don't know, subhuman-y dog things with these mouths. And I don't know, I think that had a weird influence on my art style as well. That's going to make me sound so pretentious when you look at kind of, I don't know, the man with a long chin or something, and then kind of go, oh yeah, that's very clearly influenced by Francis Bacon's study of three figures at the base of a crucifixion. No one's going to make that link.
Well, I bet you nobody's ever asked you that before.
No, and I've never answered that either. I've never even had to think about it. And and now I have thought about it. I just think, God, what a pretentious twat.
No, that's quite interesting, actually, because that is something that I've noticed, because it did look to me as though they were wearing ball gags or something, these characters.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, actually, no. There is. This is going down the rabbit hole now. There used to be a prog rock band that I was into back in. I'm still semi into them. They're still going, believe it or not. A band called IQ, and we used to go to watch gigs at the Marquee Club in London. And back in the day when I didn't mind being in a mosh pit at a gig, we used to try and get down the front. And for some reason, at one gig, I'd made me and my mates these mouth masks, which were just like kind of, they just covered our mouths and they sort of changed the expressions. And sort of one of us would have sort of an angry mouth. One had a big smiling mouth, one had a surprised mouth, and they were strapped on with kind of elastic and like with big red lips. And we just stood at the front of the gig, kind of right in front of the band with these masks on. I don't know why we did it. The band didn't respond to it or react to it. We didn't get any kind of acknowledgement for the massive effort I'd gone to. But I think that had a sort of influence on those digi ball gag mouth elements as well. It wasn't just Francis Bacon. It was my own stupidity.
It does sound as though Slipknot might have taken some influence from that.
Well, I do like to think so, yes. I like to think that I'm Slipknot's number one influence.
Oh, that is really weird.
Yeah, that's sorry. I'm sorry.
No. I didn't expect that answer. It's okay. Well, right, so
I think you've got to adopt the slogan, it's all uphill from here.
It's all uphill from here, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to pull the conversation back to reality just a little bit. And Digitiser 2000, which of course you launched towards the back end of last year. Was it September?
Do you know what? I don't know. It might have been sort of October, November, something like that. Yeah, I don't think it was as early as September. No, I'm burping again. Sorry, Dan.
Well, that's quite all right.
It's not the most professional guest you'll ever have on this show. I think it was sort of October, November that I kind of popped up again on Twitter and started doing stuff. It was November. No, sorry, my other half is actually mouthing November at me from across the room. It was November. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to kind of bring it back. It's all been done a bit kind of on the fly, really, and just fumbling around in the dark with it. But I am loving doing it, I have to say.
Yes, and the response to this has been fantastic. You have a Patreon, don't you?
Yeah, which is doing well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's doing fantastically, isn't it? What's it up to now?
$1,091, something like that as of today. I mean, I'm trying to encourage our patrons to migrate over to PayPal because there's this slightly weird new European legislation called VATMOS, which makes it all a bit of a pain in the backside, which I won't bore your listeners with. But yeah, if anyone does want to contribute to our campaign, they not only get lots of lovely freebies and regular kind of videos and the like, and our man's daddy's joke book, which is full of 500 or so ridiculous jokes. They'll get all that. But yeah, if they want to support us, PayPal is probably the best way going forward rather than Patreon. But there's details. If they go to www.digitiser2000.com, there's all the details on the website.
Okay, excellent. How are you finding the fans' response to Digitiser 2000 since you made your triumphant return to writing?
Well, as long as I don't write anything about Gamergate or cats, people are very, very supportive and seem to sort of love it. And it's, I'm just blown away. I'm blown away by the sort of level of support on Patreon and PayPal, blown away by how nice everyone has been. You know, I really, really wasn't expecting it. And I'm genuinely humbled by it. Really am. You know, for something that stopped 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now, you know, for it to kind of come back, and for me to come back, having been sort of out of the public eye for sort of 7 or so years, you know, for that to happen and kind of people to just sort of, you know, welcome me back with open arms and welcome Digitiser back with open arms. It's, yeah, I don't know. It's lovely. It's really lovely. I kind of, there's part of me that sort of wants to kind of knock it on the head before it all goes sour. But let's just hope it doesn't.
No.
Yeah, you know, but it would be a nice way to sort of end the story of Digi. But you know, let's hope we can keep the goodwill going. Just don't mention cats.
The cats are going to bring Digitiser 2000 down. Cats and Gamergate. Ah.
Yeah.
Public enemy number 1 now.
That's me.
Well, speaking of articles that you've written on Digitiser 2000, you recently wrote one about the best video game documentaries, and you placed From Bedrooms to Billions at the number 1 spot. Now, I've got to ask, were you ever approached to appear in this, and how likely is a history of Digitiser 2000 by the same creators?
I don't know. I mean, wow. No, I wasn't approached at all. But then no one knew where to find me back when they were making that. I'd love to have been in it. That would have been great. I don't know. Would enough people buy making of Digitiser? Probably not.
We'll start a Kickstarter.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we have enough people reading it to justify that. Maybe to do one perhaps on YouTube or something. But I think something I am toying with at the moment is writing some sort of history of Digi, whether it features on Digitiser 2000 as some sort of serialized biography, or whether I do it as some sort of ebook that we kind of try and sell later in the year, along with some other sort of silly stuff in between, you know, or whether we do it as a kind of best of Digitiser 2000, you know, this year, you know, along with chapters on the history of Digi, because it's a good story. There's definitely some good anecdotes in there and some ups and downs that are worth relating. But yeah, I don't know. No, I wasn't asked to be off in Bedrooms to Billions. But yeah, if they're doing another one, I'd love to be. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yes, Bedrooms 2 Billions with a number 2 in the middle. Bedrooms 2 Billions starring Mr. Biffo, coming this fall to theatres near you. Only on Teletext.
Yes, that would be a thing, wouldn't it? A whole animated movie done in Teletext. That I'd like to see.
Well, you say that. It could happen. Watch the skies.
I will. Intriguing.
Intriguing indeed, ladies and gentlemen. But I've also been trolling your Digitiser 2000 YouTube channel. Who knew that Mr. T had a British accent? Is he the Major from Fawlty Towers?
Yes, how about that? Well, you know, we did that. I should probably explain what your listeners. We did just really as a way of trying to work out how to sort of edit a kind of podcasty thing together. We took some of our Mr. T problem pages material from Digitiser 2000 and sort of made it into, well, I suppose dramatized it, for want of a better word. And when it came to kind of doing Mr. T's voice, which is me doing Mr. T's voice, believe it or not, I thought, I could be in some seriously dodgy territory if I try to make myself sound like Mr. T. So I kind of went a different. And you know the way Mr. T's always been written on Digitiser, he isn't written, in the way that Mr. T himself talks. It's kind of, if you sort of read it, it is sort of written like he's some kind of sort of weird, deluded thespian. So that's how I kind of portrayed him, really. And now, unfortunately, when I go back and read, I didn't read Mr. T's stuff in that voice before in my head, but now if I go back, having listened to my own podcast, I go back and read Mr. T letters and things, I can only hear my own voice doing it. It's really bizarre. And weirdly, because my girlfriend does the voice of the letter writer in it, and now any letters that are written to Mr. T on Digitiser, I hear being read in her voice. It's very, very odd.
Hey, Mr. T. I'm worried that my son is addicted to video games. He stays in his bedroom all day, rocking his head from side to side in his gaming chair, playing shooting games online with cackling, jabbering foreigners. I'm terrified of taking his tea up to him, only to find he's issued a fatwa upon me or embarked upon an illegal war with our neighbours under some sort of false pretext, in direct contradiction to the will of the United Nations. Is there any way I can break his addiction? Yours kindly, Pentathlon Hentathlon III.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Mrs. Hentathlon, that most young people enjoy the video games these days, whereas you and I might have spent our days hanging out at music halls, rolling a wooden hoop along the cobbles, and listening to trannies, transistor radios. Modern youngsters like all sorts of different things that we couldn't possibly hope to understand. When we were young, a lolly was a type of frozen confection on a stick. Nowadays, when people talk about lollies, they're referring to their own amusement, often at the expense of other people, on social media, or a picture of a cat stuck in a cardboard tube. Nonetheless, I feel I should tell you that if your son ever shows up at my door and tries to take a selfie of me or starts humble bragging that he met me and I wasn't very nice to him, I shall be left with little option but to rap my knuckles hard against his collarbone. My message to your son is this: Mr. T does not make idle threats. I will shatter his clavicle. I do apologise, everyone. I appear to have rather lost my way there.
It fits perfect, actually. Stay away from my binge.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, actually, was that Mr. T I heard there?
It was, yeah, he's just here with me now.
Oh, cool.
Oh, no, he's gone again. What a shame.
Oh, no. Well, I have a question for him. Well, maybe you could pass this question on to him. And here it is. Mr. T, I understand it must be increasingly difficult for you in this age of multiple recycling bins, but why don't you just put your bins in the backyard?
Tell you what, submit it to Mr. T for his next podcast, and I will put it to him then.
Okay. I'll just write that down on a piece of paper. And, we don't need to do this anymore, do we? I'm thinking we're still in the teletext days when we have to write SMS messages, as I used to do. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons behind the name Yackchat is there used to be a section on the BBC teletext called Backchat. That's where it comes from.
I remember that.
Yes, and I used to submit all sorts of nonsense to that, including lengthy messages by letter that got cut down for space because there were only about 3 lines available, but I'd written a whole page.
How bizarre. Do you know, I used to write to Channel 4 Oracle's team pages, weirdly enough. I actually wasn't even write to them. I don't even know. I think it was a section called Buzz that yes. Oracle used to run. And you used to ring up and leave a message on an answer machine, and then it would appear in a kind of message board stroke Twitter sort of format on their pages. And I remember the first thing I ever had on Teletext anywhere was I rang up Buzz, and they'd been asking what was your favourite Christmas present. And I told them that I don't know why I said this. I mean, I must have been about sort of 15, 16 or something like that at the time. And I rang up a message and left a message saying that I'd got a Bernard Cribbins action figure for Christmas. And the editor of Buzz was a guy I think called Gareth Herrinks or something at the time. Gareth Herrinks, that was his name. And he responded to it saying, "Oh, did it come with the optional squeaky voice?" And then Gareth Herrinks came to work at Teletext for a while, which was very strange. Anyway, there you go, another bit of trivia and
okay.
A boring anecdote for you. But yeah, so I had stuff on the medium of Teletext prior to having a job as a Teletext. Like yourself, you obviously got letters on the CFAX one.
I did
I was
indeed.
Wall Street. I did Channel 4.
Was there a bit of a rivalry between the two, CFAX and Teletext?
No, not as far as I know. No, not in the slightest. I don't think, I think CFAX were much more kind of news based, and, we never had any rivalry at all with them. Not that I was aware of.
Well, I can actually remember now the first contribution I had printed on Teletext, and this is your Teletext, not that dirty CFAX.
Yep.
It was to a section called The Magazine, which some people out there may remember, or probably not.
Yeah.
But
with White Line Warrior.
It was rather strange. It's hard to explain it, and I still can't place my finger on exactly what it is. It's like a letters page, but not. You basically just submit funny things, and then one of the Teletext editors responds to it in 2 lines of text, and that's it. But my first ever contribution was 10 things you can do with a walking stick. And I think among the list were play snooker, play golf, decapitate people, and of course walk with it. And the response was, walk with it. Who'd have thought, eh?
Well, I wonder who that was, because I know because Digitiser, we used to sit we were right sort of next to where the team pages were edited, which they were a few different editors. There was a girl called Mink Capfera, a girl called Emma Wyatt, a guy called Paul Goddard who went on to edit Planet Sound as well, and they were the main team that I remember. I'm sure there was some other writers, but they were the main ones that I recall doing it. So it would have been one of them. I would have known who responded to that, and they would have responded just sat a few feet away from me. How about that?
Oh, I always thought it wasn't just the one person responding each day.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, because the mood of the person seemed to change on a daily basis. Whereas one day it might be sarcastic, like that one was. Another day it might be, apathetic.
Yeah, there was no one white. They called it White Line Warrior, didn't they? Because it was white text or something. I'm sure it was WLW or something like that. But yeah, it was always someone different. It was whoever was writing it that day.
I knew it. I knew it. My childhood has been... No, it hasn't really. It's not been ruined, really. I knew that all along. Because I was a cynical child.
You see, the curtain's been lifted now. I believe it or not, one day on Teletext, I even wrote the horoscopes.
Oh.
I'm not even kidding. I kind of... they needed someone to write the horoscopes because at the time they were still trying to negotiate with an astrologer called Patrick Walker. And it was before they'd kind of signed a deal with him. He was quite famous, Patrick Walker. And it was just whoever was free for 5 minutes. Could you quickly write the horoscopes? I just made them up.
Oh dear.
Made them up, unlike kind of real astrologers who, of course, don't make them up, who have some kind of cosmic insight. Yes, anyway.
Did you write them as Mr. T?
Stay away from my Taurus.
Yes, Mr. Taurus. Okay, so I guess I should ask you this, because we've skirted over the subject of video games, but do you still play older games, retro games? Would you term yourself a retro gamer?
Yeah, I'm toying at the moment with buying one of those. Is it called the Retron 5?
Oh yes.
I really want one. Although there's an Android tablet that I actually saw Dear Ashens playing on YouTube recently. that kind of came pre. I don't know if it came preloaded with emulators, but it was quite easy to get the emulators on there. And yeah, I really, really want one of those two things because I do. I still love kind of old games, and it's more than the gameplay. It's the sounds. It's the visuals. It's just that the way that they kind of transport you back. Really, it just sort of evokes a sense of sort of earlier, sort of more innocent age. I do find a lot of the time when I play kind of early Spectrum games or Commodore 64 games, they play like dogs. They're bloody awful to play, a lot of them. But and that's sort of a almost heresy to say that sometimes in kind of retro gaming circles. But yeah, the reality is, games are more playable these days on the whole.
Oh, that's controversial. Controversial.
Well, yeah, sorry, it's the truth. You're kind of dealing with kind of controlling a game with a crappy little rubber keyboard, versus some sort of nicely ergonomically designed kind of joypad. That's just the reality. The technology's better to facilitate it, but what the games did have back in those days just was a charm and an innocence and a sort of otherworldliness that games don't really have these days. Playing something like Jet Set Willy or, there's a BBC micro game, Crystal Caverns or something like that. I can't remember the name of the game. It's escaped me, but they, playing, some of those early games, they just transport you. There's an old saying that people say that, the pictures are better on the radio. Yeah, because your mind's doing all the work, and I find that with retro games, with those early games that nowadays kids, anyone who plays games these days, they're giving it all on a plate. We've got the graphics are so detailed, but back when I was growing up playing games, your mind filled in the blanks. So if you were walking through a kind of very basic kind of castle corridor or something like that. In my head, it wasn't like that. There were cobwebs and there were shadows and flickering lanterns, and it just felt magical. And I don't know how much of that was because I was a kid playing those games or whether it was because they inspired my imagination. But that's what I love about retro games is the way they transport you back to an earlier, more innocent but more magical time.
Do you think there's an element of that with Teletext as well, then?
Gosh, I don't know. You'd have to tell me because you're sort of the Teletext, aficionado. Really, it was for me. It was very much. It was a job. It's I'd love to. I'm interested to know. Kind of what the appeal is of it for people. What the appeal is for people of Digitiser, why it sort of seems to be remembered so fondly. But from my point of view, I was at the eye of the storm, so I don't have much perspective on it.
I think it's much the same reason that we still play retro games, because it was such a big part of our childhood growing up and what made us. So I guess we constantly look for things that remind us of that. There is a link that can be made between the old Atari games, the old Nintendo games, and Teletext, in that, as you say, your mind does fill in the blanks, because when you read a Teletext story, or look at a Teletext picture, basically it's just a mess of pixels, or a bunch of pixels, or just some text on the screen. Your mind actually has to create the plane crashing into the Twin Towers on 9/11. Oh no, that was a bad idea there, wasn't it? That was a bad example, sorry.
But you know what? It's actually, it's not. It's a really good example, because I remember really clearly reading about the first Gulf War starting on Oracle News. I remember my first daughter had just been born. I remember I woke up in the night to feed her, and I put on Oracle to just have something to sort of read while I was feeding her. And, I remember it was so stark seeing those words in the just text on the TV screen, and it said the Gulf War or the invasion of Iraq has begun. I remember it really clearly. And, it was somehow kind of almost more powerful than watching it on the news. Don't know. But maybe I can relate to it. Maybe I can sort of yeah, the fact that, it wasn't slick, it wasn't, being fronted by, someone with nice shiny teeth, a sort of talking head type person. It was all sort of a bit more kind of mysterious. Maybe that is part of the appeal of teletext. It sort of felt that, there was someone, you knew there were people behind it, but you were kind of detached from them, so it sort of perhaps felt a bit more magical. Don't know.
Interesting fact, I found out about Michael Jackson's death via teletext, although it was the new teletext rather than the old analog teletext. This was the digital teletext.
Oh, the digital teletext.
Yes, it's not really teletext, is it? But they cling on to that. On my television here, I could switch it on and put up the new, updated red button. But it's not really teletext, is it? It's an emulated, sorry version of the classic medium.
Yeah, same.
Well, Paul, it's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you this evening, but I'm going to finish on a teletext question, and it's this. Was it fun to come home drunk at 1 a.m. and read your own stuff on teletext, as I'm sure many, many others did?
I don't think I ever did that. Do you know, this is a terrible thing to confess, but for a big chunk of the time that I was writing Digi, I didn't even have a teletext TV. That's shocking, isn't it? So I think I hardly ever read Digitiser at home, least of all when I was drunk. I spent all day doing it. I drank to get away from teletext, not to watch it whilst I was drunk. No way. But yeah, so that was it. That was it. That was how you used to read it, was it? You used to read it 1 a.m.
No, not me personally, because I was about 5.
Right. Oh, so you're making me feel up.
I did used to come in from school to check teletext. Particularly, one other moment I remember reading on teletext, finding out about, is the England cricket team beating Pakistan, I believe in the year 2000, 2001-ish, and that was the first time we've beaten them, I think, ever in a test series. Right. And it was a very famous test match where England won, and it was completely pitch black, but the umpires allowed everybody to stay out.
Right.
Because Pakistan were time wasting, see, and they were just waiting until it got dark. But anyway, England chased down these runs, and these umpires were just stood still like that. All of this in my head. I didn't need to watch anything on television to get that. I mean, I've watched, obviously, highlights of it subsequently, but nothing quite matches what I imagined in my head at that time.
Yeah, it's God, so while we're sort of reminiscing on those sort of things, I mean, I can remember, I can't remember much, but in terms of sort of other specific things, but I remember reading, I was at work at the time, I remember reading, God, actually, this is an anecdote for you. There you go, for a bit of teletext trivia. I used to work with, prior to working at Teletext, I worked with the guy who did Bamboozle. Lovely guy called Julian Edwards. And I worked with him at Ladbrokes. He was my boss at Ladbrokes when I was doing the graphics there. And I got in the job at Teletext, ironically. I kind of had left Teletext, then went to work at Wembley Stadium. Oh, sorry, I'd left Ladbrokes, then went to work at Wembley Stadium, then went to work at Teletext. And I recommended Julian for a job, and he ended up there as the competitions coordinator and the guy who used to write all the questions for Bamboozle, which I'm sure you remember.
Yes.
But I remember really clearly when I was working at Ladbrokes the day that Margaret Thatcher resigned or was booted out. And I remember it partly because Julian, who used to write Bamboozle, was really gutted. And I didn't understand, because it was like, why is anyone upset that Margaret Thatcher has been booted out? It's good news, isn't it? But I think his politics lay in a slightly different direction to mine. So, that I remember reading about her, leaving Number 10 with tears in her eyes and all the rest of it. Poor Maggie. Anyway.
Everybody with the teletext television has their own moments, the where were you moments. I dare say some people first found out about things like Princess Diana dying, John Lennon being shot on teletext.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's I'd love to know those kind of stories. I mean, I think that's perhaps something for I don't know. I'm suggesting things to you for some of your Teletext projects, but I'd love to kind of maybe that's a book, maybe there's something in it, or some sort of repository of kind of Teletext memories.
It's funny you should say that, because something may be in the works. I shall say no more. I shall say no more, but
you're a man of mystery.
there is certainly room on the market for a general interest Teletext book, because I have yet to see one. They're all boring exercise books and massive engineering and technical tomes.
Yeah. I think there is a gap there. So hurry to your mystery project and get that.
Yes, because unfortunately we've announced it here on this show. So everybody's rushing, or not, to go and write that. No.
Yes, including me. I've picked up the pen.
No, you swine. I want to be in the credits.
Inspired by Mr. Harry Yack.
Mr. Harold Rutherford Yack. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of this particular episode of Yackchat, the first ever. I'd like to thank you, the listener, for tuning in, and Paul, for joining me.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure once again. So anytime you want me back, I'm always happy to come along and waffle and upset people.
Cool.
About cats.
The cats, yes. Oh dear, your life is all about cats and dogs now, isn't it? But we'll not go into that. Yes. We will not go into that. I may well take you up on that offer sometime in the future when Digitiser 2000 has hit the big time and you're a superstar once again, even bigger than you were in the 1990s as the editor of Digitiser, the Teletext video game magazine.
Bless you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having us on. It's been a joy.
Excellent. So, is there anything you'd like to say in closing, Mr. Biffo?
Come and read www.digitiser2000.com if you like it. Perhaps you could consider supporting us, because we're trying to do it alongside our day jobs, and really it's a lot of work, and it'd be great to just have the space to kind of really focus on it and make it something amazing. But it's free if you don't want to support us in that way, and that's absolutely fine too. We don't hate you for that. We just don't love you quite as much as the people who give us.
There are other ways that you can help Mr. Paul Rose out.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, just spread the word. If I'm kidding, obviously. We know life is expensive. So, if you do like the site, just spread the word, really, because the most important thing is that it grows, and, we can get it to a place where, maybe it can be back permanently, rather than this sort of slight suck it and see approach at the moment, because I'd love it. I'd love to do it full time. I really would. I've enjoyed it so much so far, and, people that have read it seem to really love it. And I don't think there's anything quite like it out there at the moment. It seems to be filling a kind of slightly different niche. A lot of games writing these days is quite serious, and we're just trying to do something different and not be too serious about it all, and just have a bit of fun. Yeah, so that's the ethos. And if you like the sound of that, come and read it. Just come and have a look.
Go and have a look, ladies and gentlemen. If you like it, maybe give it a retweet or something. And you said something there. Life is indeed expensive. I like that phrase.
Yes, it doesn't come free.
Life's not cheap, but time is free. And unfortunately, our time has run out for now. So from me, Mr. Harold Yack, and from Paul Rose...
That's me.
It's sayonara.
Bye.
Those ruddy bastards! Some boy is rocking my bins! You there! You boy! Stay away from my ruddy bins! Stay away or I shall ruin your throat! Come back here! Boy!